Good morning. Welcome to the Florida Post, a virtual roundtable organized by the opinion editors at the USA Today Network of Florida. I am Isadora Rangel. I am Florida Today's engagement editor in Brevard County. And today we're going to have a very important discussion about Amendment 2, which will be on the November 3rd ballot. It would raise the minimum wage to $15 by 2026. This is obviously an issue that people have very different opinions about. And so today we're going to bring you the side that's advocating for Amendment 2 and the side that is advocating against Amendment 2. And before we dive a little deeper into that measure, I'm going to introduce my guests today. On the pro side, I have John Morgan. He's the chairman of Florida for a Fair Wage, and Ben Pollara. He is the senior advisor to Florida for a Fair Wage. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
And on the side that's advocating against Amendment 2, I have Eric Hoppenbrouwer, Executive Director of the Political Committee Business Voice in Brevard County. Jay Johnson, he is the owner of Bubba's Roadhouse and Saloon in Cape Coral, and he is the Lee County Chapter President for the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. And I also have Heather Parsons, a server and bartender for the Crab Tap in Destin. Welcome. Thank you for being on this live broadcast with us.
Good morning, and thanks for having us.
And I also have a couple of members of the USA Today Network. We're going to be asking questions. I have Brent Batten. He is a columnist with the Naples Daily News, and KRYS FLUKER. She is the opinion editor for the Daytona Beach News Journal. Thanks for being with me.
All right, thank you. Good to be here.
And by the way, if you don't know about the USA Today Network, we cover a huge part of Florida, from West Palm Beach all the way up to Jacksonville. We're also in Tallahassee, Pensacola, Sarasota, and Southwest Florida. So, like I promised, I'm going to play you a short video explaining what Amendment 2 does.
There are 6 potential changes to the Florida Constitution coming before voters in November. Amendment 2, $15 minimum wage initiative. Amendment 2 would incrementally increase the minimum wage of Florida workers from $8.56 per hour to $15 per hour by 2026. If passed, Florida workers would see minimum wage increase to $10 an hour on September 30th, 2021, and increase $1 a year thereafter, with standard cost of living increases resuming in 2027. A supermajority vote of 60% is required for Amendment 2 to pass. Proponents like Orlando attorney John Morgan say Florida must pass an amendment ensuring a living wage that will provide workers with the means to pay for basic needs for themselves and their families without government assistance. Opponents like the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association say a minimum wage at $15 per hour will have disastrous effects on the state's tourism industry and will cause employers to find ways to cut staffing, reduce hours for remaining staff, and find ways to automate work. They also remind voters of the trickle-down impact, as business owners would be forced to pass along the cost to consumers.
So that's Amendment 2. If you're watching us, let us know in the comments. How are you voting on Amendment 2? Do you have questions? Are you still undecided? Let us know and we'll ask our guests to answer those questions. So now we will begin with their opening statements, and then we'll move on to questions. And just so you know, we have rules in place to make sure this is a fair conversation and everybody has roughly the same amount to make their case. So they'll get 3 minutes to do their opening statements and 2 minutes per question. They also get a 1-minute rebuttal and a 2-minute closing statement. So let's begin with the opening statement on the pro side. And John and Ben, if you would like to get started, you can choose who can go first.
All you, John.
Okay. Well, good morning. I'm John Morgan. Here's the deal. In the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, I think all of us can agree there has been a tension in this country that has now spilled out into our streets. The rise of Bernie Sanders was a phenomenon. The rise and the election of Donald Trump was a phenomenon. Underneath all that, I believe, is the issue of income inequality. What is happening in America is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and the poor are getting ready to rise up. It's just not fair. when you think about it, you got to think about it like this. You know your system is broken when you make more money and do better staying at home than going to work. A lot of people do the math and go, if I go to work, I get this amount of money and I have this amount of expenses, daycare, travel, buses, or I can stay at home and get food stamps and welfare checks and government assistance, all borne by the taxpayers. And so this income inequality is causing serious fissures in our country. Now, I don't think anybody can agree that anybody can make it on $8.57 an hour. It is just not possible. Do the math. What does it come out to? $220, $230 a week. And so I want everyone to know that just like some of the panelists here, I also own hotels and I also own restaurants and I also build shopping centers. And I have factored all this in. I am in the tourist industry. I own 2 attractions in Florida. And I have carefully looked at this, and from my perspective, it's a no-brainer because it's the right thing to do. We've laid this amendment out in a very gentle way. It will take 6 years to get to $15 an hour. By that time, it may be moot. Hobby Lobby yesterday or the day before raised their minimum wage from 15 to 17, and it's happened across the country. It's $10 an hour year 1, and then 11, and then 12, and then 13, and then 14. Not only is it the right thing to do, it's the compassionate thing to do. Essential workers, we now know who they are. We just watched them and are still watching them in this pandemic. They are essential to our daily life, yet they're the ones that are treated the worst, the poorest, and it gets worse and worse. 40% of Americans don't have $400 in case of emergency. What I'm suggesting here is a conservative proposal because we're going to take taxpayer dollars that are being used and return to taxpayers, and we're going to let business owners pay their fair share. This is an act of compassion and decency.
Thank you. And that was John Morgan giving you reasons to vote for Amendment 2. Now let's hear the reasons to vote against Amendment 2. You have the anti-side has 3 minutes to make their case to voters. Eric, Jay, and Heather, whoever wants to go and give the opening statements, go ahead.
Well, good morning. My name is Jay Johnson. I own Bubba's Roadhouse in Cape Coral, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak today on Ballot Amendment 2 and the devastating impact it'll have not only on my business, but all of Florida. Ballot Amendment 2 will mandate a 77% increase on the minimum wage and an even larger increase, almost 100%, to the tipped wages that servers, bartenders, and other tipped employees are paid. To put this into real-world numbers, at Bubba's, in year 1, this wage increase will cost me $86,000 per year, and by year 5 will cost me over $350,000 per year. Both numbers are more than we make in a good year, not to mention this year where we were first forced to move to a takeout-only model, and now we're only allowed to operate at 50% capacity due to COVID-19. Currently at Bubba's, we've moved into negative for the year and don't anticipate making any profit this year. If Ballot Amendment 2 passes, I would be forced to look at reducing my workers' hours, eliminating some jobs, or worse yet, close our 26-year-old business. And that is one of the main reasons that I don't support Amendment 2, is it hurts the people that it is intended to help.
All right, thanks. So now I'm going to move on to my panelists, Brent and KRYS. Let's begin with your questions. KRYS, why don't we start with you? Do you have any questions for our guests? And KRYS, we cannot hear you. If you want to unmute yourself.
Sorry.
It happens.
Technical difficulties. I'm gonna pose this question first to the pro side, and it comes from our Larry Reisman at Treasure Coast Newspapers. Will increasing the minimum wage lead to increases in the price of goods and services for everyone?
I'll take this. It should not, because as we've discussed here today, this is a very gradual increase in the minimum wage over a period of 6 years. It goes from $8.56 an hour today, which I think we can all agree is not only not a living wage but not a fair wage, to $10 an hour next September, and then $1 a year every year thereafter until it reaches $15. So this is a very gradual, conservative increase to the minimum wage that should not have a dramatic impact on consumer prices.
KRYS, I believe you had a question for the other side too.
Well, actually, I wanted to see if they wanted to address that as well.
Absolutely. I'll take that unless, Eric, you have something.
I'll jump in, Jay. Actually, senior citizens on fixed incomes can't bear an increase in cost to services and goods. On the Space Coast here, we have a large portion of senior citizens, and those folks absolutely are on Social Security, annuities, or even their investments in retirement. And those opportunities to be able to gain more income are not available to them because they're out of the workforce. So absolutely, it would affect senior citizens most definitely.
All right. Do you want to follow up, KRYS or Brent?
I'll kick it over to Brent.
Okay. A question for the folks who are opposed to the amendment. Based on previous conversations and my own observation about job postings around town, it does seem that the most jobs being offered now are pay above the minimum wage already. And if you're paying above the minimum wage, why does an increase in the minimum wage affect your bottom line? Can't you just continue to pay people what they're paying? What does a minimum wage that is below what most people make, how does that affect your bottom line, or why is that a factor? Why can't you just continue to pay people what you're paying them?
Brent, that's a great question, and I'd love to address that. The biggest impact on minimum wage for me as a restaurant owner is not to my back of house employees that are making $13, $14, $15 an hour already, but to our servers that are making a tip wage. Under the tip credit, our servers are currently paid $5.54 an hour. However, they have the opportunity to make tips. And many of my bartenders and servers make well over $200 to $300 a shift. With this amendment, that rate is going to go up to $11.98, or over 100% increase over the course of 5 years. And that's where the true cost lies for the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry. I think Heather's a great example of that, who's a bartender server and is already making good tips, but is going to be in danger of having her hours reduced as a result of a minimum wage increase.
And Heather, I'm wondering if you have anything to say about this, because you are a server and bartender in Destin, and you were one of the workers that people would assume would benefit from Amendment 2. But why are you on voting against Amendment 2?
Well, because it's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt my family. I make way more than $15 an hour over the tips that I make, and when the minimum wage goes up, so does the server wage. So we're going to lose out on money. And the restaurants that we work for are going to have to add a surcharge to the bill just to help support paying the front of the house. And the back of the house won't be able to receive any raises because of the Amendment 2.
Wondering what Ben and John have to say about Heather's concerns, or just how it would work for servers and people who rely so much on tips today.
Well, some smart restaurateurs around America have already decided that the tip system is a broken system, that it doesn't work, and they have incorporated in their restaurants a price that includes that tip. When I hear people say that I'll have to cut back on staff, that's simply not true. Why would you cut back on on your staffing or your hours? Either you need people or you don't need people. When business owners and restaurateurs said, I'll be forced to cut back on people's hours, I think to myself, is the reason you're letting them work right now because you don't need them, you're just trying to help them? I don't think so. I think they're working because you need them, and you will never cut their hours back as long as you need them. And if you do, you're making a huge business mistake, and I can't help you with that.
And by the way, we're getting a lot of engagement online, people with strong feelings about Amendment 2. Saravana Kabilan, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, says that we can now raise our menu price every few months. Your proposal will hurt small restaurants, but we also have folks who support Amendment 2 online. I will vote yes for Amendment 2, says Liz from Palm Beach County. We need to pay our workers a living wage. As this is done gradually over 6 years, it's absolutely doable. In the long run, it will boost the economy. And I'll throw it back to Chris and Brent so they can follow up with their questions.
We also posted this on Reddit in the Florida subreddit, and we got a couple questions from those users as well. And one of the ones that stirred up a lot of dissension among the people discussing it in that thread was from a user named Mr. Ron Obvious, who asked, won't a higher minimum wage discourage lower end workers from seeking training, education, or other ways to improve their skills and aspire to higher paying jobs?
Good question.
And I guess we would start then with the pro side for that.
No, I think that's I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, if anything, higher wage jobs should encourage people to pursue further education and give them the opportunity to pay for their own education. So no, absolutely not.
I have a question I'd like to address to Ben and John. What provision, you mentioned in your opening statement, Mr. Morgan, a living wage and the ability to provide for a family and basic needs without government assistance. What provision might there be for folks who aren't really looking for necessarily a living wage, who aren't a head of a household, who might be a teenager looking for a first job, or a senior citizen maybe just supplementing income that they already have from retirement? What about those folks that aren't necessarily into it for a living wage, but need the added income or need experience to get a better job in the future? Is there any provision made for them?
Well, that's a very smart question. Unfortunately, when the leaders of our Florida legislature were pushing back on this, if you look back, you'll see the tweets that I made way back when, and I said to the legislature and to the governor, look, the best way to do this would be legislatively. A constitutional amendment is very narrow, but there wasn't one hearing, one witness, any testimony, because the truth is a lot of big donors like the idea of paying people slave-like wages where you just cannot live. And so the only resort was a constitutional amendment. And with the constitutional amendment, it has to be very narrow, single subject, and you can't deviate. And that is why we were cognizant of that, and that is why we start off so slowly. I don't think anybody listening disagrees with $10 an hour. I can't imagine that. Even my friend with the Bubba's Roadhouse, I don't think he would disagree with that. I don't think he would disagree with 11. He's talking about he's paying his people 12 and 13 and 14. By the time we get to year 6, $15 an hour may be woefully inadequate and seem unnecessary at that time. And that's why we did it in this gradual way. So guys like Bubba's Roadhouse don't have that kind of sticker shock and have time to get ready.
Jay, wonder if you could address that and also incorporate kind of a question into it as well. If not $15 an hour, what should be the minimum wage? Or the anti-side do advocate that the minimum wage should stay at $8.56.
Well, first of all, I think it's ludicrous and very offensive to say that we're treating our employees like slaves. I think it's offensive to the small businesses around Florida, and it's offensive to the descendants of slaves that were suffered at the hands of others. Now, today we have the opportunity to pursue the American dream, and I believe we're all equal, and we all can use our talents and ambitions to start our own business, to build up your talents, to build up your wage through learning and doing better. I don't think there's a business owner out there that's not going to give an increase to people that are doing well and are excelling at their job. So I find it offensive to be lumped into that group. You know, we're just trying to get by, and especially with what COVID's done to our numbers, it's made it very difficult. In terms of the wages for our back of house employees, I think they suffer quite a bit as well from this amendment, because I'm now giving wage increases to our servers. And our servers are making more money than our back of house employees through tips and the tip system. Now, what's going to happen if I have a certain amount of money that I can give for increases? It's now all going to the front of house, and there's very little left for the back of house, the people that should be getting that increase. So I think that hurts the back of house as well as the front of house. And the minimum wage is not meant to be a living wage. It's not the wage that we pay people. It's a starting wage. It's a training wage. It's a baseline. And as you build up your talents and as you do more things, your wages go up.
Well, Jay, if you don't think a minimum wage should be a living wage, you and I are never going to agree on anything, because the living wage is essential. And the people that are being most damaged are our essential workers. And we have seen that people are willing to pay essential workers more for essential services. We've seen DoorDash charging people an extra $3 that seniors are paying as the DoorDash comes to their house, comes to their apartment. And so if you don't believe a minimum wage should be a living wage, then yeah, that's called slave wages, Jay.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next question here. I'll ask KRYS and Brent if they have more questions for the guests.
I'd like to ask John and Ben maybe just some background, and maybe the other panelists can address it as well. How did we arrive at $15 an hour? Why is that the figure? Why is it not 12, or why is it not 20? As you mentioned, Mr. Morgan, it could be inadequate by 5 years from now. Why 15?
Well, because we were sensitive to people like Jay, and we understood that coming all at once would be too hard. It's still, like I said, it's a constitutional amendment. We came to this number because $15 an hour is a number that people could live on, and unlike suggesting that minimum wage is not a living wage, I just disagree with that in a very substantial way. And so once we get to 15, then we have a mechanism that then clicks in and starts to raise the minimum wage with COLA after that. And but again, it could have been done much better and much more effectively, but doing nothing is not an option.
And again, we're getting a lot of engagement online, so I'm going to read some of the messages that have been left on our Facebook pages. Helene is asking, she's from Florida today in Brevard. Hi, Helene. I live in Brevard as well. Why couldn't this be done legislatively instead of by constitutional amendment? It seems that our Florida Constitution is being amended way too much. There are 6 constitutional amendment measures on the November 3rd ballot. In 2018, there were 12, I believe. I want to ask our guests, is our Florida Constitution being amended too much?
Well, I would point out that like half of the amendments that are up this time around were put up by the Florida legislature. So not only could they have legislated a minimum wage and chose not to, they could have legislated some of the things that they are putting before voters. So in almost every case, though, especially in recent memory, whether we're talking about minimum wage or medical marijuana, these amendments have come before voters because the legislature has failed to act. Florida had no minimum wage prior to 2004 when voters placed it in our Constitution to begin with. So yeah, the legislature could have done lots of these things, but they chose not to. And when you look at them putting forward amendments every 2 years, they are proactively choosing not to legislate.
And what I would ask that caller or reader is answer this question. what has the Florida legislature ever done to benefit the people of Florida? Not the powerful of Florida, the people of Florida. When you answer that question, you know what your answer is going to be? I can't think of a thing. And that's why we took this directly to the people, and we'll let the people decide what's fair and what's not, and not lobbyists and special interest. By the way, Jay, you all are paying your executive director of the Restaurant Association $700,000 a year while you're down there scrimping by at Bubba's. How do you all have the money to pay that lady $700,000 a year? Times are so tough.
And I'll let Jay, Eric, and Heather tackle this. And Jay, feel free to address what John said, but please also answer the question about are we amending the Constitution too much?
Well, first of all, I think it's another falsehood that proponents are peddling to fool the people into the scheme. You talk about other people's wages. The only wages I know about are what I pay my employees and those that I see. I don't know where you get your numbers. Secondly, I think the amendment is not the place to change this. I would absolutely be for letting the legislators handle it.
What if they won't?
And I'll just wait and see if Eric and Heather have something to say about that.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's just say this. First of all, no other state has ever passed a constitutional amendment mandating a minimum wage. It's very concerning to voters and obviously the folks in the business industries. But when the legislator has not acted, it's probably, in fact, that the people did not actually want it. Only 2% of Florida's full-time equivalents actually are paid at that minimum wage. And obviously, there are some jobs that are not meant for a living wage. Some folks do them, as stated before, that that they're either supplementing their income, or for the most part, what we haven't talked about is youth unemployment. For the most part, youth unemployment goes higher as the minimum wage rises. And so that keeps out young people an opportunity to gain very important experience and skills that they wouldn't get elsewise. Plus, I mean, the fact is that the way that some of these amendments are being put onto the ballot is to circumvent actual representation of people who have been voted into the legislature.
Well, let me just say this to Eric very quickly. What you said is totally false, that the legislature would do it if the people wanted it. With my medical marijuana amendment, the legislature refused to do anything, nothing. And the people of Florida passed it with 72% of the vote. And they didn't allow smoke. The legislature didn't allow smoke. And then I had to sue the Florida legislature, and Rick Scott and Governor DeSantis wisely said, yeah, we got to give the people what they want. And I applaud him for that. And
I understand.
So 73%. And the other thing about the constitutional amendment, that is the most direct form. We don't have to listen. All you all know how Tallahassee works. There's lobbyists like Jay's who's getting paid $700,000 a year during this pandemic that Jay's so worried about. They're working those legislators. They represent the most powerful. When you use the word 2%, that's who's being represented. We're here to represent the 98% who don't have a lobbyist.
John, let's let Eric address this, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Well, with all due respect to Mr. Morgan, I mean, the fact is that whether it's the marijuana amendment or this one right here, the devils are in the details, of course, which is that the reason for a legislature is to hammer out those specific instances when it comes to a broad policy that may have general support. Even 72% of voters may support something, but in all honesty, there are a lot of different issues, like with medical marijuana, even though we're not on it. There has to do with the fact that the federal government hasn't legalized it yet. So unfortunately, whether or not the people by a direct democracy support an idea doesn't make it necessarily a great thing to implement through policy.
All right. So let's just move on because we have so many questions we want to get to, and I have a good question for the pro side. By the way, it's coming from Oscar online, and then I'm gonna go back to KRYS and Brent in just a minute. The question is, why can't tip earners be treated with a different wage? Great question, Oscar. If Ben and John Morgan want to address it.
Tip earners are treated with a different wage. There's, I think Jay can probably address this better than I can, but there are tipped wage credits in the law that allow folks like Jay to pay tipped servers currently well under the minimum wage, and would continue to do so after the minimum wages increase. And the bottom line on that question is a good question because as we're talking about the cost of goods and services going up under a minimum wage increase, the whole business model of restaurants in this country is built on passing that cost on to consumers, and doing so kind of slyly by this tip system, right? Your meal costs what it costs with the tip on top of it, with the 20 or 25% on top of it, not what it says on the menu. And that's a scam that restaurants have been running on the American consumer for 100 years.
Jay, I'm sure you would like to address that. I'll give you a quick rebuttal here.
Absolutely. First of all, Mr. Morgan was kind enough to bring up the system that other restaurants have tried to eliminate tipping. However, Danny Myers in New York City, which was one of the largest proponents of eliminating the tip system, because of the impact COVID had on his business, put it back just last month. The tipping system is something as a part of our culture here in America. Our guests like to tip. Our guests feel that they're helping the service industry, and they're also getting better service as a result of it. It's the carrot that helps us and that is in front of our servers in order to give great service, in order to go above and beyond for our customers.
And you understand, Jay, that this amendment doesn't stop people from giving extra tips.
Well, unfortunately, what this amendment does is going to raise the rate that we're paying to our servers, and it's going to take away from our back of house.
But you understand that I can still give this nice lady from the Crab Shack $100 tip if I want to.
Jake, can you address this, and then we'll move on to the next question?
Absolutely. But as a small business owner, as you said earlier in your statement, that smart restaurant owners have to look at new systems. We're going to have to look at a new system in order to handle the impact, the financial impact to our business. It's $350,000 a year on our tip servers alone once we get to year 5.
All right, so let's. I'm just going to read a couple more comments, and I'll ask Brent and KRYS to ask the next question from Daytona. Alexis is saying Pasco County, Florida tax collector office started $15 wage in 2018, so we know it can happen and not destroy Florida places. A follow-up from Oscar, who asked the previous question: minimum wages should be increased, but it should not be applied to tip earners. How are you feeling about Amendment 2? Let us know in the comments. How are you voting on it? Any concerns, questions that you have? Let us know. KRYS and Brent, let's move on to the next question.
I'd like to throw out another question from Reddit. And this is a comment from a username no1684900. And that person says, at my job, which is not a minimum wage job, salaries have not been raised in 7 years. Rent 7 years ago, where I live, was about $600 a month. Now it's $1,300 a month in the same city for the same apartment. If we don't increase the minimum wage, how do we address wage stagnation while the cost of living skyrockets? And I guess we'd throw that first to Eric or Jay.
I think you have many issues at play in that statement.
Yeah.
And many that I can't control. I can't control rents. I wish I could. What I can tell you is that as wages go up, businesses are going to pass along that increase to their end consumers. And that's going to happen across the board. In addition, we haven't even talked about the impact of government. One of your listeners or readers wrote in there that Pasco County is paying at $15 an hour. However, the Florida Tax Watch has said that this amendment, if it passes, will cost the Florida government on the state and local level $540 million by year 5, and there's no way to recover that without raising taxes. it's going to have a net negative impact on the budget.
When we're talking about $540 million, and that's by year 5, that's like a less than 1% impact on the state budget. It's like 0.005%. So yeah, that $500 million is a big number, but when we're talking about a budget, state budget in the trillions, it's almost nothing.
And Jay,
All right.
if you've been around 26 years, you have seen the cost of everything go up. Look at the cost of a Disney ticket 20 years ago, and look at the cost of a Disney ticket now. But as rents and tickets and food has gone up, the rise in wages has not been close to going with it. And the one thing that we can control, you're right, we can't control rents, but we can control a fair wage. And that's what this is all about.
I think Mr. Morgan is kind of being a little bit wrong in this situation. You know, Seattle has tried to get to a $15 minimum wage since 2015, and there have been studies done. And one of those studies actually said that the low wage workers average cost was about $125 extra insofar as they lost hours. And when companies have to pay higher wages, they will look to have more effective employees, meaning more profitable employees, and pay them higher wages than they will pay the lower wage employees. So actually, it hurts low wage workers more so than it helps them.
Eric, have you ever used a daycare?
Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question here. And I actually want to follow up on what you brought up about Seattle, Eric. I've been doing some research on my own and looking at different studies that have been done. It seems to me, at least from the stories I've read, that the studies looking at an increased minimum wage are kind of all over the place. In Seattle, there are studies that show that it has a detrimental impact on job losses, for example, but there was a follow-up study that showed that there wasn't a significant impact. Again, on the other hand, the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, did a study on a $15 federal minimum wage and saw that there would be more than 1 million job losses nationwide. So for the pro side, my question is, how can you guarantee that Amendment 2 will not cause job losses and maybe fewer hours for workers? And then I'll ask the side that's advocating against Amendment 2 to answer, how can you certainly say that this will have a detrimental impact on the economy when the studies seem to show us different data depending on what you're actually looking for? So let's begin with John and Ben.
You can't guarantee anything, except we can guarantee that the way this is going is not sustainable. People can't live. There'll be a civil war before that happens. What we do know that we can guarantee is a minimum wage. I'd like to know from everyone what they think the minimum wage should be. And as far as reducing workers, you only reduce workers if you don't have customers. If Bubba's Barbecue has a full restaurant, they're going to need a full staff. And if they have a full restaurant, that's because people like that restaurant. And he's never going to take jobs away and give less service because people then won't come back to his restaurant. And so we can't blame, we know this, Jay knows this, 60% of all restaurants in America go out of business in year 1, and 80% of all restaurants in America go out of business after year 4. So who's to blame for that?
So Jay, Heather, and Eric, can you speak about how can you guarantee that this will have a detrimental impact on the economy?
Well, first I want to say, John, I think we finally agree on something. No one can guarantee anything. There's no question there. However, the studies that have been done, specifically the CBO study that Isabel was referencing, said that raising the minimum wage on a federal level takes 1.3 million people out of poverty, but puts 3.7 million people out of work. And to me, those numbers don't match. You know, now we take the COVID year that we're in, and we look at restaurants across the state. And again, no one can really tell us the number. It's been out. I've heard anywhere from 15% to possibly a high of 20% out of business because of COVID. And you put this on top of it, you're going to put even more businesses out of business than you'll actually save.
Jay, 80% of all restaurants go
And
out
John,
of
I'm sorry to
business
cut you off,
without
but
COVID.
let's let Eric, Jay, and Heather finish their side. I'll let you address that. Go ahead.
So the Seattle studies, there is some, I don't want to say confusion, but some disagreement. But the facts are that when there was jobs that increased in number, they went towards larger businesses because they could afford the cost increase because they can disperse it over a larger scale because they have economies of scale. Let's just talk about it. Amazon, Target, Walmart, they've all raised their minimum wages to $15 an hour, but small businesses can't afford that. And so what you see from those studies is that whatever job gains actually happened was at the cost of small businesses. Here in Brevard County, we have the second most diverse economy in the state of Florida, and we like to keep it that way. And the way you do that is by maintaining small, large, and medium businesses.
Thank you. And John, if you can just, I know you want to say something, but I'll give you a minute. Can you just address the concern, say, of a small business owner who really wants workers to make more money, but is concerned, what if my business ends up paying for this by simply going out of business or really suffering? What would you say to those people?
I would tell small business what you got to do is you just got to up your game and do a better job if you want to be competitive. I would tell small businesses you have a lot more to worry about Amazon and Walmart and Target than you do raise the minimum wage to $10 an hour.
All right. So let's move on to Brent from the Naples Daily News. Thank
you. Jay's mentioned a couple times, but we really haven't addressed fully the elephant in the room, and that's COVID. I suspect when all this started, no one thought for a minute about something like that happening, but it has happened. We see thousands of businesses closing altogether, and certainly laying off workers. How does raising the cost of labor help them get back in business, help them bring those workers back? John and Ben, if you'd like to address that.
Well, I will tell you, I'm in the attraction business, and my businesses have been devastated by COVID, destroyed. But I think any business owner or any voter that's going to vote as if COVID is going to be here forever and ever and ever is not very forward thinking. And so what I would say is the same thing I say to myself. I'm not doing anything based on COVID being here forever. I'm doing everything about COVID going away someday. And so what I would say to that question is, in a year from November, raising the wage from $8.57 to $10 an hour is not going to affect at all recovery from COVID. 2 years later, going to 11 will not hurt the recovery at all from COVID. But at some point, you can't just be blaming 9/11 and COVID and the Great Recession for all your woes. This is a capitalistic society. The reason we're the greatest economic engine in the world is because we are capitalist and we find a way to win. And I guarantee you this, Jay's going to find a way to win. I'm not worried about him at all.
And by the way, I think, COVID has provided a huge rationale for passing this amendment, because the folks who are working the hourly wage jobs today are the folks that are who we are now realizing are our essential workers. The people that are at Publix, Walgreens, Home Depot, who worked every single day while the rest of us were sheltering in place, who worked every single day before there was any mask orders, while everybody else was staying home. The folks making $8-10 an hour were the ones that were working, and they're the ones that deserve a fair wage.
Does the other side? I'll give you the other side a minute to address that if you like.
So every job is actually essential to someone. In fact, when someone loses their job, they don't have a way to be able to take care of their family. So that's what our side is trying to put forth, is the fact that increasing a minimum wage would reduce the opportunities for the young, the immigrants, and for the less educated folks out there who just need an opportunity. During COVID, you're seeing mostly the hardest hit are the small businesses. The Walmarts and Home Depots of the world are still open. And I mean, during the time of COVID, small businesses don't have the opportunity to put $7 million towards a constitutional amendment. So, I mean, the fact is that it hurts small businesses. It doesn't help small businesses.
Great. KRYS, I believe you have a question.
I did. And it kind of follows along with what we've just been talking about. And I'd like Heather to start with this one. More than 1 million Floridians are on unemployment right now. And through July, they were getting the federal supplement of $600 plus Florida's base rate of $275. That works out to $22 an hour. And for many Floridians and probably most of Heather's coworkers, that was the first time they'd ever had an income that high. Do you think that experience has influenced the idea of what constitutes a living wage in Florida?
Well, I will guarantee you that while I am working, I make more than $22 an hour with my tip, and almost 90% of my coworkers do too. We are all homeowners. But the people that have decided to not go back to work is just because they're getting free money. I mean, if you work in a restaurant business, you work there because you know that you're going to make the money that you need to support your family. That's why we do what we do.
Okay, and we're keep getting great comments here online. Let me read one of them. Rhonda says, just curious, how much is a burger at Burger King going to cost if we're paying $15 an hour? Oscar says, it appears that the bigger the pockets of business owners, the most approving to the amendment. Nika says, it's being done over 5 years, so how is it going to hurt anyone? I'm going to ask Brent and KRYS if they have any more questions before we move on to closing statements. We're reaching 15 minutes.
I'm anxious to hear the closing statements.
Yes.
Great. So let's give 2 minutes each. So we'll start now with the anti side. Eric, Jay, and Heather, if you want to go. And Jay, you're muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
There we go. Absolutely. I think the one thing that we've talked about the most is the impact that this is going to have on small business and our employees. I think that Amendment 2, if this passes, is going to hurt people across the state of Florida, and that's why I'm urging you to vote no. It's going to kill jobs. It's going to be a lethal blow to the Florida economy that's trying to recover from COVID. At one point, Ben said that $550 million was a drop in a bucket. In my world, $550 million is a heck of a lot of money. And not only that, we look at the decrease in the state income collected through taxes during COVID. It was $1.5 billion. So I don't know how that's a third of the budget that you're talking about as a drop in the bucket. Again, I think this is a lethal blow to small business. I think it's a lethal blow to Florida's economy, and I urge you to vote no on Amendment 2.
Eric and Heather, any last thoughts?
Absolutely. Like I said, here in Brevard, we have the second most diverse economy out of all 60 some odd counties in the state of Florida, and we'd like to keep it that way. And I represent a group of large, small, and medium businesses here on the Space Coast who all support the idea of opposing Amendment 2 because of the idea of a diverse economy supports everyone, including the young, the old, the infirm, and even immigrants coming to this country, wanting a chance to get an opportunity to get the American dream. I myself come from an immigrant family. My mother's family immigrated here from Syria, and they were able to own a grocery store. I don't know if the wages that they gave to their employees were living wages at the time, but they were able to prosper, and now I can actually do things that they couldn't. So it's important to think about opportunity.
Great.
Go ahead. I'd like to say that I have done this job for 20 plus years, and I've raised 5 boys doing it. Like I said, this directly affects me and my family. I won't be able to afford to only work one job and still be at home with my kids.
Thank you. Let's move on to the pro side. John and Ben, your last thoughts.
I've been blown away today how everybody on the con side is so concerned about immigrants and illegal immigrants being treated fairly, when most of the times when I hear from the Chamber of Commerce crowd, they're wanting to ship all 13 million immigrants back to where they came from. This is a matter of compassion. This is a matter of taking tax relief off taxpayers who are supplementing these businesses. I'm in a business where we represent people a lot in the restaurant industry who have wage theft. I have 40 lawyers that do nothing but litigate wage theft. With this minimum wage, where we have people not paying the minimum wage, not paying overtime, not paying what they're supposed to do, illegally splitting tips, gigantic class actions, because these owners not only want less wages to be paid, but want to keep and steal wages from their people. This is the best method to do it. It's a gradual method, $10 from $8.57 to $10 to $11 to $12. By the time this thing gets to $16 or to $15 an hour, my hair is gray now. I'll probably have no hair. I'll be 70. I may be dead by the time it gets to 15. This is about compassion. This is about doing the right thing for the most people with the least.
Ben, any last thoughts, or can we wrap up?
No, I'll let John close with his. I have nothing to add to that.
All right, well, this is it. I want to thank all of my guests for being so kind to participate and being respectful. Also want to thank Brent and KRYS, my colleagues in the USA Today Network. Thank you all so much for doing this. This means a lot to us and the voters. This was the Florida Post, and we just discussed Amendment 2. Let us know, what other topics do you want us to discuss in the future? There are 5 other amendments on the ballot on November 3rd. Which one would you like to hear about? I am Isadora Rangel again with Florida Today, and you have a great rest of the day. And we'll be back soon with another Florida Post.